inclined from thy law. I remembered thy judgments of old, O Lord, and have comforted myself. Horror hath taken hold upon me because of the wicked that forsake thy law. Thy statutes have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage, and I have remembered thy name, O Lord, in the nights, and have kept thy law. This I had because I kept thy precepts.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing in the Gospel, in the book of Psalms, not the Gospel, the Gospel of Psalms. Well, there's a sort of a Gospel of Psalms, isn't there? All right. But because the Psalms are prayers, often they come in forms that are not really, it's not trying to preach about gospel. It's trying to preach about, it's not preaching gospel, proclaiming God's kingdom, though sometimes it sort of does. But oftentimes it is from the perspective of human experience, with God and with the world. And so you have to, think about it, what's being said. All right, why is that not right? All right, here we are. Oh, come on. All right, there we go. We're in verse 34. He's talking about all the ways that God assists him. He makes my feet like hinds' feet. He girds me with strength, makes my way perfect. He teaches my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. And I'm trying to remember. Like, I looked up the meaning of that bending. I was just curious. Or broken. Well, because I was like thinking, does that mean? I mean, it's fine to have I break my bow, fine, but I mean, often though, to go down to descend is what it means. To go down. Brought down, broken, brought down. Maybe. I thought it might have something to do with the actual using of the bow, like a very difficult. Be broken. See, look at. In the New American Standard they call it so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. Okay. And what it's saying is that, bows come with different. I'm not an expert on bows, but I know that they're not all the same. Some are easier to bend, meaning to actually put an arrow to the string and to. Is it to string with to bend your bow? But I thought it was maybe to shoot it, whatever. Anyways, let me put it this way. There are varying degrees of difficulty in various bows. Like, the more powerful the bow, the more powerful the user has to be. What he's saying is, he teaches me how to use the weapons of war most effectively and makes me able to use the most effective weapons of war. And that's what that means. All right. So, yeah, I can that's what I figured a minute. It's something more like I can use this bow. Breaking bows is, though there's the passages where it says, the bow of so-and-so is broken, referring to the defeat of the enemy. But I think this is more talking about, he teaches my hands to war so that I can use the most powerful kinds of bows, or the most difficult. I don't know if you make bows out of bronze, but I think that would be the point, that it would be something very, like that would be an extremely challenging bow to use indeed. I mean, that's what it sounds to me. I think it's 144 also says something very similar. Blessed be the Lord my rock, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. I always used to talk about how that it's interesting the hands learn skills. I know it's not like that. I know it's like your brain, but it feels like it. Like I play the guitar, and I hardly have to think about. All I have to do is think C, and my fingers form the shape of a C chord. I don't have to think index finger here, middle finger there, ring finger there, pinky there, thumb in this position. It just goes right into position. It's like I just, I have all these different little ways I can position my fingers, and I don't even have to think about it, especially when there's a guitar there. They just jump on, they just jump around. I mean, I can switch chords very fast, and I never have to think about the motions of my fingers because they know. And I know that's the autonomic systems of the brain, so you don't have to like write me emails tell me about the autonomic systems of the brain or whatever systems there. I understand that the brain learns these things. But it's interesting, but the conscious mind doesn't have to think about them. That's what the autonomic system is all about. Just like walking, you don't have to think about every muscle you pick up. But then you think about like trying to thread a needle, unless you're an expert who does it all the time. It's like you think about every motion of your fingers. And the same thing with war and other skills you might learn. There's things I remember, not remember, but I mean remember, but recently, in wrestling they talk about muscle memory. There's no such thing, technically speaking, but that's how it's practically felt. When you do something over and over again, it feels like your muscles literally remember how to do it because you don't have to consciously think about it. And certainly, there are parts of the brain that are controlling those muscles that have learned it, and they're not having to think about it, not having to recalculate. It's like there's the pattern has been built in. And God teaches us so many things like that. There are some things, I think that I used to not understand properly. But then after long, exposure to God's Word, you begin to just, certain issues come up and your brain leaps into automatic activity. You know what I mean? If you're thinking in terms of spiritual war. But that's a little hazardous sometimes because we can mistake our own automatic response to things for actual real, like when you get so accustomed to a particular viewpoint or a way of doing things, it's difficult sometimes to change, or it's difficult to recognize maybe that, I didn't have this right. I didn't have this right to begin with, but it's become so ingrained in me that it's hard for me to hear anyone talking to me about this particular issue. And so we have to be careful that we don't, think that, God has made us so sure in this thing, but really it's only our own, we're just victims of our own stubbornness. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath holden me up, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps unto me, that my feet did not slip. I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them, neither did I turn again till they were consumed. I have wounded them that were not able to rise. I have wounded them that were not able to rise. They are fallen under my feet, for thou hast girded me with strength unto the battle. Thou hast subdued under me those that rose up against me. Thou hast also given me the necks of my enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. They cried, but there was none to save them, even unto the Lord, but he answered them not. Then did I beat them small as the dust before the wind. I did cast them out as dirt in the streets. Where David was a king. He ruled over people. He fought. But it's not without lesson, because we also are kings in our own way. The system of government that I live under requires me to be self-governing. So I have responsibility, like a king does, under God, to administer my life according to the right way, according to what seems best. And also to participate in society to the degree that I am an asset to the whole, and not just a what do I say? Not just a mindless follower. We should not be mindless. When it comes to the scriptures, when it comes to life, when it comes to politics, when it comes to all those things, we should not just mindlessly follow. It's dangerous, and it's not what we've been called to just do whatever you've been told by whoever it happens to be that's telling you. And certainly in our country, like I said, God has given unto us, we've been given the heritage of, we have to be responsible. Freedom is responsibility. We have it, and it's not I have no right to give up my freedom, because it's not my freedom I'm giving up. I'm giving up the freedom of my descendants, my children and my grandchildren. That they should look back on my generation and say, they just sat back and let it be taken from them. They had freedom and they let it go. And now we don't have freedom. That was the generation which freedom died. I don't have permission to just let that happen, because it's not just for me. It is the system under which God has blessed us to live. And there are things that are worth fighting for. All right. I'm getting ahead of myself, really. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath held me up. Thy gentleness hath made me great. Okay. Give me the shield of thy salvation. We talked about the buckler and the shield extensively at the beginning. That God's salvation is a shield. It's what means we cannot really be defeated. Though I can be slain, I cannot be beaten, because God has my back, because I have the shield of God's salvation to protect me. In the New Testament, he calls it the shield of faith. It doesn't matter. It's just a symbolic thing, a shield. God has given me something, and we are saved by faith, and that through grace. So when it talks about the shield of faith, it is a shield of salvation, even though it talks about the helmet of salvation. It's not, there's no, a lot of times with symbology, there's no fixed meaning. Salvation can be a helmet, it can be a shield. Both protect you. It's just a symbolic representation of something. And what that something is I have a relationship with God. And, I have things towards him, and he has things towards me. And one of the things towards me from God is his salvation, his protection, his ultimate guarantee that no weapon formed against me will prosper, that all things work together for good for those who love God. Of course, sometimes God has the ultimate good in mind, and not necessarily what we might think as the immediate good of that might be, like the ultimate good might include my life being laid down. That could be ultimate good. It's not ultimate good I'm interested in participating in anytime soon, but as the Lord wills, we must do. Thy right hand hath hold me up. I mean, you used your strength, your right arm, to hold me up. You lent me your power. Thy gentleness hath made me great. Gentleness. I want to see what that's, what's that about? Mm-hmm. Gentleness has made me great. So it's like meekness. And the word great means to multiply, by the way. Gentleness, meekness. A lot of times, let me see. Anav, mildness in a royal sense, also concretely oppressed. Feminine of an anav. I'm just curious what the root meaning is here. It means poor, afflicted, humble, meek. So, the idea of meekness is not one we really understand very well, I think, in the modern time. But it might better be translated something like restraint. Meekness is the outward manifestation of self-control. You know what I mean? Like when you're exercising self-control on the inside, you have an outward, mild demeanor. And that's what I mean. A meek and mild demeanor. Meaning that, God, if God were to be hypercritical of me, and then the psalm, he says, my righteousness and all this, he sort of sounds almost like he's bragging about how good he is, right? But I've always asserted, and I still do, that such statements in the Old Testament are a reflection of a God who is restrained in his response to man's sins. So that, the reason that David can look and say, hey, God, you've looked at me and found nothing wrong, is because God is graciously, his attitude towards us is one of graciousness. And so, through that gracious attitude of like, I want to bear with you, I want to help you on your path, I want to assist you, put your faith and trust in me, and I will build you up according to my word. Because he has a gracious mindset towards us, he also uses mildness in his dealing with us. Meaning, I could say I've been chastised of the Lord. I have suffered, quote unquote. I'm going to make it very, when I say suffered, I mean mildly. All right, there's the word mild. I've suffered mildly at times because of my sins. I've suffered because of my sins, but not to the degree that it probably warranted. You know what I mean? There's no, what would I say? No justification. I'm sorry, I got distracted by what was on my other screen. Like that my actions might call, like in all fairness, for harsher treatment from God. Like I probably deserve harsher treatment very often. But instead of just, harshly coming down on us, God is mild with us. He is mild with David. David means well, intends well. loves the Lord from his youth. He was strong in his faith toward God. When it came to standing up to Goliath, he was ready. It didn't mean he was absolutely perfect in every way, but in the most essential ways. In the ways God deemed, and this is from God's perspective, like, what does he want from a human being? And he looks at us. He understands our frame, and in his mercy, he often is very mild in terms of the punishment he metes out for what we've done. And punishment in the sense of chastisement, not in the sense of just purely retribution. I don't want God to deal with me on a purely retributive, I don't know if that's the right word, if that is a word, on the basis of retribution only, meaning repayment. Repayment, some people think they'd like that, like, oh, God owes me big, I've been such a good boy. But none of us would come out too well on a pay scale if God were to just give us what we deserve at all times. God does not give us what we deserve. Not just us who believe, but even the wicked don't always get the punishment they deserve. Certainly not at the moment. He is long-suffering. He bears with us. He bears with them. He endures, as it says in Romans 9. He endures with much long-suffering the vessels of wrath. Though they be fitted to destruction, he endures them. He also endures me. And that is something I do not want to... the psalmist is often very clear, whether it's David or whoever is writing the psalm, it's very clear in their perspective of like right and wrong, like I'm on the side of right. Or that God has taken my side is enough. Sometimes my side is all I have, when it's just my life, like my life or the lives of my enemies. Lord, I want you to take my side in this, that kind of mentality. And through this mild rebuke, as opposed to the rebukes he could deliver, it allows us to grow. Because otherwise, it might be too harsh. And we would just forever be under this retribution of punishment for all the ways we continually fail to live up to the absolutely perfect standards of God. But instead, like I said, the law is a lesser standard of righteousness. Christ explained that in the Sermon on the Mount. It's you've heard it was said, "Thou shalt not kill," but I say to you, whoever's angry, whoever calls his brother Raka, you've heard it said, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," but I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery with her. God has a much higher standard of morality than the Old Testament law demanded. And so you could be pretty righteous under the law. For the most part, be, guiltless. Paul claimed, concerning the righteousness which is of the law, I was perfect. And Jesus, one of the cornerstones of his teaching was that you got to be more righteous than that if you want to enter into God's kingdom. That's not righteous enough. And the point is that we need God's grace because we'll never be righteous enough. And through that mercy and through his gentleness and restraint in dealing with us, it enables us to grow beyond what we are into something that's more pleasing to him. You've enlarged my steps unto me that my feet did not slip. Obviously the meaning is clear. Enlarged my steps. I've seen that come up a lot of times, and I guess I don't understand exactly what the symbolic meaning of that is. Like, made my steps large. Does that mean made me step, like, bigger? Or made my feet bigger, so, like, they're less, they have a bigger, what they call, footprint? I was, like, trying to, profile? What's the word? Footprint. Yeah, footprint. So the footprints are larger. It gives it a larger surface area, more stability. Like, if you have a structure that has a large base, it becomes more stable. Perhaps that's it. But whatever, the idea is that what God has done for me makes it so that my feet don't slip. He makes me sure-footed. You know what I mean? I stepped, and as I walked through this world, God enlarged my steps under me. He made my steps larger. Why? What's that accomplish? That I should not slip. And so, it's almost like, again, like he is gentle with us in our mistakes and our errors. He also helps our infirmities. He helps us to walk better and more uprightly. God takes steps and actions to help us become what he has set out to make us in his word through the preaching we've received. I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them, neither did I turn again until they were consumed. So then, these verses now are kind of brutal. It's like, I chased my enemy down until they were consumed, man. I've wounded them. There were some that were not able to rise, right? As I was chasing them down, I found them wounded. They weren't able to get up, right? And now they are fallen under my feet. I slew the wounded, is what it's saying. And we could think of that as a horror, right? But, there is a certain importance to the relentlessness of the pursuit. There was a time, I forgot which king it was. Was it Ahaz? One of the kings of Israel, one of the prophets came to him and said, take this and smite with it. I think it was a sword. And he kind of was like, okay. Nah. There, how's that? And the prophet was kind of angry. He's like, you should have smoten, you should have been like, and then you would have smote your enemies till you consume them. But since you didn't take this too seriously, you will smite them but once. Yeah. You will just get that one hit. That's all you get. Because you didn't pursue it with zeal. Because the necessary zeal. Enemies sometimes linger. If you don't take care of business. If you don't take care of your enemies, if you don't finish them off, and I could be speaking of spiritual enemies here, and I mostly am, because it's like that's where the enemies, the most important enemy is the enemy within, the enemy that leads us astray. The principalities and powers we wrestle against, the rulers of the darkness of this world. So when you pursue your enemy, you want to pursue them to the final outcome. You don't want to let them limp off to regather their strength and come back and harm you again. That's the thing is like, I love mercy. I've been shown mercy. But ultimately, for the enemies of God, in the end, there is no mercy. You know what I mean? There is no mercy. He that hath judged without mercy shall receive judgment without mercy. That's how all judgment works outside. Because if God is merciful in judgment, things turn out well. And I suppose, some people believe in universal reconciliation, and for them there would be mercy for all. And at least I would say they have a consistent view of God in that regard. They have him as all merciful. Really, really, universally loving. And that's fine. I mean, that's their point of view. I don't agree with it, but I will say it, in passing. That's like, okay. But even so, even in that point of view, the elements within that pollute us, when it says, put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, wickedness, all these the sinful things within man that lead him astray. Paul talks about them in terms of, he talks about there being like a war in his members, meaning in his body, literally, like there being this war going on for control. And in that war for control in your body and in Christ, you need to take the initiative to have. What I'm saying is, like, you need to take no prisoners. We don't take prisoners. If I got an enemy on his knees, in terms of spiritual things within myself, especially, and in the world, who knows? There's times for mercy. There's times for no mercy. But you've got the enemy on his knees, so you run him through. You don't be like, oh, okay, well, hey, maybe we can ransom you. This happened with Og, king of Bashan. Was it Og? No, it was part of the story of Saul. When he went to war against the enemies of God's people, God had to smite them utterly, destroy them utterly. And he went and did the destruction, except he spared the king and some of the best of the cattle and stuff, because this stuff was too good to destroy. He was covetous after it. And he saved the king because, kings ought to do one another a solid and not, go ahead and just execute them summarily. It was Agag. I remember because the prophet came, and when he found what Saul had done, was very angry with him. And he took a sword, and he hewed Agag in pieces before everyone as they looked on. A very brutal moment with the prophets there. So he hewed Agag in pieces. Because sometimes we think like, oh, well, the enemy, hey, we'll just keep the enemy around. We'll just keep the sin around. We won't use it. We'll just keep it around. Just be kind of there for backup or something. I don't know. We're keeping it around. We don't want to hack it in pieces and make it. I've done this with sinful things in my life, trying to get them out of my life. I've hewed them in pieces to try to get rid of them. Even when I was a kid, I'd get dirty magazines and I start feeling bad about it, embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed. All the normal emotions you might feel from exhibiting any kind of weakness. Because it was a weakness that, hey, it's like, it's a powerful force. You expose children to it, it can affect their minds. And I remember getting rid of it and being very careful to make sure it was destroyed, not just like tossed away so that I could run back out and get it, but I would destroy it in such a way that it was useless. I used to soak it in water and tear it up and ruin things utterly, so that I couldn't go back. Try to leave it all behind me. You want to put the enemies behind you. You want to hew them in pieces. You don't want to leave them on their knees so they can get back up again and run you through when you've got your back turned. And there's a harsh brutality. Put to death, therefore, your members. And I'm speaking primarily spiritually. Here's the thing. Sometimes, even with enemies, there is not, sometimes, certainly with the enemies of God's people, there are times when you can't leave them. You certainly can't leave it. You have to, if it's not a question, back in David's day, things were very boots on the ground. There was not a lot of structure where you could leave an enemy alive, and that would be okay because you'd put a new something or other in place. But You have to thoroughly dismantle what was. You have to thoroughly dismantle what was before. Or the enemy can rise up again and hurt you. You shouldn't take your hard-fought victories and throw them away for the sake of like, well, let's spare this, let's spare that. Here, David, when he speaks of these things, he speaks of them as virtues. I pursued them till they were consumed. I didn't be like, okay, they're fine, they're running off. He had to regroup and reform and then come back and hurt me later. Thou hast girded me with strength unto the battle. Thou hast subdued under me those that rose up against me. I said they rose up against me. It wasn't like I was just trying to oppress people. They rose up against me to do me hurt, to hate me. Or they hate me. In the next verse, thou hast also given me the necks of my enemies. When God gives us strength to fight, we should use that strength to the utmost to have the most complete victory possible. Pursue things with zeal. Whatever you do, do with your might. And that's from Ecclesiastes. Put your heart into it. Don't do it halfway. I can think of a lot of scriptures where people took things half seriously, and it never works out. We want to give ourselves wholly to the Lord. I don't want to just give myself partially to the Lord. I want to give myself wholly to the Lord and towards His service. If I give myself in part, I'll never really obtain or see what could be if I would just give myself wholly. I can never obtain the victory I would if I would give myself wholly to the fight. We must give ourselves wholly. W-H-O-L-L-Y. I think that's how you spell it. H-O-L-E-Y? Whatever. Completely holy. That type of holy. Not H-O-L-Y. And give me the necks. The neck is a very sensitive spot. And it's funny, I was considering talking about George Floyd's killing, because actually I have some insight on that, because I participate in submission grappling. I was thinking about talking about it because I think I didn't watch the whole thing because it was distasteful. I was watching a man be killed in front of me, right? But I also understand something that I was watching that, and they do the hashtag I can't breathe thing, right? But as a coach of wrestling, as someone who has participated in that sport and also in submission grappling, where you are literally trying to strangle people. So I know a lot about strangleholds. I know about being strangled. I know about strangling people. I've experienced it firsthand many times. I've been in that. How many of you have had, have had someone up on your neck trying to strangle you? I know what it's like. And one of the things I've always felt that when someone says, I can't breathe, I'm always a little cynical about it. I'm like, well, I can hear you talk. If you can talk, you can breathe. All right, but it doesn't mean you're not having trouble breathing. When I go grappling, sometimes someone will try to choke me and they don't get the holden right? Because these things are technical and you have to get it right. You have to get it just right in order to put someone out. So people will get on my neck and they'll get in an advantageous position. They'll get wrapped around my neck. But if I prevent them from getting the holden properly, there's no way they can make me tap out. Because I've stopped them. They have to catch me. So it's hard unless they're really strong to force that into the once I see it coming, I can do things to defend myself and prevent myself from getting strangled. All right, so I've been in a really nasty chokehold, but that wasn't good enough. And what you do is I'm laying on my back and he's trying to squeeze the life out of me, but it's not good enough to block my airway, not good enough to get to restrict the blood flow to my brain either. So what I do is you just kind of relax. and just sit there and breathe. And he can squeeze all he likes. But I've got position, and he can't put me out, and I won't tap. It's just a hold. He's got me in a hold, and he cannot make me tap out, which means I tap out when I'm going to be strangled. And when I look at that George Floyd video, I think I see two things. I see one, the guy who's got his knee on his neck, he looks like he doesn't care. And I think it's because he doesn't think he's killing a guy, personally. I don't think with all those cameras on him and knowing what, the world the way it is, he looks like totally like, I don't give a crap about this. Because he doesn't realize the danger the other guy is in. And that's because he has that sort of probably prejudice like feeling, like I say, like if you can talk, you can breathe, and you're fine. And it goes on for, if you can't breathe, you don't last 8 minutes. But that doesn't mean the guy on the bottom wasn't struggling. And the thing is, from experience in grappling, here's the thing. Someone gets me in a chokehold, right? Early on, I would tap pretty quick. I didn't learn the technique of relaxing and taking steady breaths and just focusing on my breathing. When sometimes you're in this really constricted place, like someone's like trying to straighten, and all you can do is barely breathe, but you can breathe, and you just focus on the breathing, and I can stay there all day. But it's not something an amateur is able to do. And I think Floyd was just not, he's not relaxing and focusing on his breathing. He's panicking. He's terrified. I can't breathe, or whatever. And so he's not like trying, and you can't tap out. The police at that point they were fed up with him because I know he was kind of giving him a hard time as they were arresting him. He was not totally cooperative. Didn't seem like it warranted the amount of force they used, honestly, but, he was not cooperative, and then he got in this situation. He doesn't know how to breathe when in a strangle like that, and to just focus on breathing. Instead, he's kind of scared, and so he doesn't know how to deal with it. So we have one guy on the ground who doesn't know the techniques for, existing in this restricted breathing environment, but instead, plus he was on drugs, and so he's very, he's not doing what's necessary to survive. And the policeman isn't really doing what is necessary to really look after his survival, because I don't think he understands the seriousness of the situation. I don't think he realizes he's going to kill him here, because here's the thing. You learn these strangleholds, right? And you expect them to put someone out. And if they put someone out, then it's like it worked. They're always dangerous, though, because you're restricting blood to someone's brain. That's why we tap out. We say, you got, some guys through stubbornness and machismo won't tap out. I'm not like that. If you got me, you got me. I'm not the greatest fighter in the world by any means. And so if someone gets me in a compromised position, I tap out. Because it's like, game's up. It's a game. But they're not playing a game. And so it's, and so I think it's a tragic sort of thing. I don't think the cop intended to kill him. He just looks like he doesn't care. And then people look at that and they say, he doesn't even care that he's killing him. It's like, yeah, he's killing them because you've seen the video. I don't think he thinks he's killing him at all. I think he thinks he's just trying to subdue him, and he thinks this is how it's done. He's probably had limited training in this kind of stuff. Like I've trained for years with grappling, practicing it over and over again. So I understand how these strangleholds work, and also the mechanics of being on the bottom. And, I've been the victim of, I haven't just learned how to choke someone out. I've learned how to be the victim, or at least how to try to fight it off, or how to make sure they don't get I always try not to give anyone an easy one, by tapping out when they don't really have me. And I think that what happened is, in that case, he didn't really have the guy. He had him in a restricted state of breathing, and he was like waiting for the strangling to work to sort of make him become to kind of lose his consciousness and go docile. But instead he killed him. Because it's very dangerous. You know, and should police use strangleholds? I think that they should have a heck of a lot more training if they're going to try to use them. They should know a lot more about it and the mechanics and the dangers. You know, they teach them a few techniques for subduing people, and it's like they take a little 1 week course, or I have no idea what the training is that goes into that. But to me, it looked like he does not understand how they work, like on some level, and he thought it was working right or something. You know what I mean? Like he just didn't realize this can get really bad. That I might kill a man here. I feel bad for him because it's like is there a more, like, nobody hardly even really talks about him personally, but it's like I don't think that it was. I think his defense will be he was not setting out to murder that man. Not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if you watch the whole... I watched the whole interaction as far as what's available. I didn't go down to the moment of death, and I should probably watch that to get a clearer picture, just to see if the things I'm saying are exactly correct. As far as I don't think his intent was murder, and that's too bad. But still, it is grossly whatever. There's a certain amount of incompetence involved. It's death by lack of understanding, lack of expertise. And it's personally, it's probably manslaughter. But I'm not a legal expert. It just doesn't seem to me like there was an intent there. You look at it and you say, like, well, how does he not know it? Well, people say, you understand when people are in wrestling. My kids will wrestle, and kids will say, I can't breathe, when they're getting pinned. It's not an uncommon thing to hear. It's not, and what it is like, well, then just lay down on your back and lose like a good boy, and you can breathe again. I mean, it's like, it's funny they cry and scream as they're getting pinned, but they're still struggling not to get pinned. I mean, like, I've seen kids are like, they're crying, and they're like, got their shoulder up. If it's all that horrible, it could be over in a second. Discomfort is part of a lot of these sports. So when having the neck of your enemies, I guess I see that, and I'm like thinking, I wanted to talk about that. I almost wanted to do a special on it, but maybe I should just bury it in the study so I don't draw attention to it. I'm already going to do something that's attention-grabbing enough. I have another song coming out on the subject. I'm not on the subject of the actual, killing. Not on that subject, but just on this general subject of the events lately. Giving me the necks of my enemies. Having the neck of your enemy is to have his most vulnerable place. The neck is a vulnerable thing. It's it connects the head to the rest of the body. It's a sensitive spot. There's very important circulation going on there. Breathing. It is to give to give someone wholly into your power, to have them by the neck, that I might destroy them that hate me. They cried, but there was none to save them. Even they cried even to the Lord, but He didn't answer. A lot of times people call out to God. And they don't have a relationship with God. When they're distressed, they call out. And this one, the enemies of David are actually calling to God. They call out to Him in their distress as they are being beaten by the one God is anointed. But there is no help for them. We don't want, that's one of the important things, is to be not on the, you want to be on the right side. I want to be on the side of right. Lest I call on God and He hear me not, because I'm not on the side of right. I don't want to fight on the side that God despises. And men find themselves on those sides and they call it to God, and God's not going to help. It doesn't mean, like, from a Christian perspective, that someone in such a position cannot be ultimately saved through faith in Christ. But sometimes the affairs of men, it's like it's not our call. My life is not as important as the overall plan. My life is not as important as the overall outcome that God has ordained. The world must unfold as it has been declared it should unfold, as it has been determined by God in his determinate counsel according to his foreknowledge. Then did I beat them small as the dust before the wind. I did cast them out as the dirt in the streets. Pretty clear analogies of utter victory over the enemies. I beat them small. They became like dust before the wind. I just blew them away. I threw them out like dirt. Just taking out the trash, right? Thou hast delivered me from the strivings of the people, and thou hast made me the head of the heathen. A people whom I have not known shall serve me. Yeah, because through his victories, David became king over nations in addition to Israel. Under him, the kingdom expanded over Moab and Ammon, Edom. A lot of the neighboring kingdoms became subject to David, and they served him. As soon as they hear of me, they shall obey me. The strangers shall submit themselves unto me. Because his success as a king, it brought about the submission of kingdoms around them, and they became subservient to David. David was king over all them, anyways. Thou hast delivered me from the strivings of the people, and thou hast made me the head of the heathen. A lot of times there's, as a king, this is probably very much an issue. The people are fighting over things. Not just the external enemies, but within. They're striving. Well, we should do it this way. No, we should do it that way. But David's victories sort of made him immune to all of that. Because when you have the victory, you have the victory. And people can argue back and forth all they like, but I have the victory. I won. So we can stop bickering about whether or not it was a good idea. As soon as they hear of me, they shall obey me, and strangers shall submit themselves to me. They will hear of the new king that we have been, we are under the control of David now, because the warlord or king who had been Lord of this land is defeated. The strangers shall fade away and be afraid out of their close places. Meaning, in the strangers in the sense of the ones who were waiting for him, who were looking to overthrow him, to beat him, the strangers who had opposed him, all the enemies fade away and be afraid of it. They're going to be down, hunkered down in their holes, afraid and frightened. Verse 46, the other part of the song. We shall have, I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, so shall I be saved from my enemies. And then a bunch of other stuff. The Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. God is the rock whom I depend on, who I found my life on. The Lord liveth. The declaration that God lives. It's an affirmation. I know God lives because, I've when I was young, I used to look at the Bible and say, there's these passages, the prophecies fulfilled, and I would look for other evidence, trying to understand how the world, how can geology be made to help us understand and affirm the Bible and all that. Looking for ways to affirm my faith through intellectual means, through the Bible, through studying, through archaeology, whatever it was. I got really into the Shroud of Turin for a while. I'm still into it. I just don't keep up on it constantly. I'm busy with other things. But ultimately, what gives me faith so that I can declare the Lord lives is that when I called on him at a certain point, I mean, I called on him before and I've called on him since, but one time I called on him and he responded powerfully. And that never quite, though the experience itself has faded with time as far as my memories, it's not like I was just there, but I remember being there and I remember the power coming over me. And I'll never forget it because I thought, God's responding. For once in my life, God responded to me. And that was significant because I never had a response from God. I know he's alive. I mean, he worked 1,000 coincidences in my life, maybe more than 1,000. There's 1,000 little miracles in everyone's life, that we could point to and say, like, look at how, but it's not the same as having, like, something extraordinary happen. And for me, that was when I received the Holy Spirit. It was extraordinary. And to me, it was signifying God is alive. God is not just like some faraway force that I can't touch or can't, be moved by me. It's like my prayers will bring him. That's so good to know. Let the God of my salvation be exalted. Lift up God who has saved us. It is God that avengeth me and subdueth the people unto me. He delivered me from my enemies. Yea, thou liftest me up above those that rise up against me. Thou hast delivered me from the violent man. Therefore will I give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen, and sing praises unto thy name. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed evermore. That's the sure mercies of David. It was promised. I will not take away my mercy from you, nor from your children. And David shall not want a man to sit on the throne. Ultimately fulfilled in Christ, because he is the son of David and sits on the throne. And the true heir. Thou wilt not leave my soul in hell. He was raised from the dead to sit down at the right hand of God and evermore reign. So it's God that avengeth me and subdueth the people unto me. God, we think of God only in terms of mercy, the gospel, and the good things. It's like God still is avenger. It's funny to me, people talk about the gospel, they still, in most Christian denominations, still believe in eternal torment. The traditional view of hell. They still believe in that. I believe in eternal torment, but in my own way. Just like you believe in the second death, if you disagree with me. You believe in the second death, don't you? Sure I do. But you don't believe, but people, I'll say, oh, you believe in the second death? They go, oh yeah, second death, that's where you're tortured forever. And I say, oh, you're tormented forever and ever? Oh yeah, that's the second death, where they die forever and ever. But the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and the torment is the memory, the information extracted, the lesson learned. Oh, I mean, is that all right? Can you make that symbolic? I mean, can you make that, can it be a metaphor like that? Well, if death can be a metaphor for something else, then certainly torment can be a metaphor for something else. There's no reason it can't be the other way. Why does one have to be literal, the other has to be spiritual? Why can't the other one be spiritual and the other one be literal? This is a question I've never heard anyone satisfactorily answer, but I'd be really interested to hear. God avenges. God brings about judgment. That's still part of the package. That's why we receive Christ for salvation, because the revenge of God is coming. God revenges the deeds. God does not He will not let things go unpunished. People get away with things. They think they're away with it, but they will know. He will make them to know. God will make them to know. He subdueth the people. He delivereth me from my enemies. Lifting me up with those that rise up against me. Thou hast delivered me from the violent man. Nothing like being delivered from violent things and from difficult things and from troublesome things to cause the heart to be glad and to be thankful. You know, a lot of times people aren't thankful for the small graces they're given, but I guess it's understandable to some degree, human nature. We look to the big things. The big things are what really matter sometimes. It's what affects us the most. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed David, to his seed forevermore. Again, we talked about that. The sure mercies of David, that is part of that. He's acknowledging that promise. You would give your mercy to me and not let it depart from me like it departed from Saul. To give the sure mercies of David. You know, that's evident in the resurrection of Christ. That's the sure mercy. That though you die, yet you shall live. And though you ought to die, yet you shall not die. I mean, I deserve the punishment for my sins. But the mercy of God is that he would not punish me according to that, but rather give me his mercy and judge me as a son. And I, as a son, I want to, in good conscience, try to do what pleases God so that God does not feel in his mercy like being mocked. Because God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked. There's a certain degree to which we can, God will bear with us. But if we don't make a good faith effort, if we try to just be like cynical about it, saying like, well, thinking it's a system. Well, God, I'm saved and God can't do nothing about that, so let's sin away. That's not going to work out so good. Not that I can tell. Anyways, so we'll continue with Psalm 19 on Monday. Thanks for joining me in this study. Look forward to studying with you again tomorrow or Monday.
Greatly in derision, yet I have not declined from thy law. I remembered thy judgments of old, O Lord, and have comforted myself. Horror hath taken hold upon me, because of the wicked that forsake thy law. Thy statutes have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage, and I have remembered thy name, O Lord, in the nights, and have carried